Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in today. My name is Corinne, you can call me Corey, and welcome to my channel, Corey Creates, where we talk about cooking, baking, and all creative endeavors. Today, I'm coming to you with a great recipe that I've been making for quite some time. It is my perfect meatloaf, okay? And what makes it perfect is it has a combination of meats rather than just strictly ground beef. So we are going to prepare that for you today. Couple of things. Everybody should have a go-to recipe. One that when you hear company is coming, you can pull that one out, grab it out of a hat. You should have a recipe that no matter what, you've done it so many times, you know it's going to be great every time that you make it. You should have a recipe that you always have the ingredients on hand so you can make it no matter what. Okay, if somebody drops by, somebody comes in from out of town, passing through, you can whip it up for them real fast. So that is what we are going to make today. One of my signature dishes, perfect meatloaf. So this recipe has a lot of ingredients. Don't let that intimidate you. Okay, most of these ingredients, if you do any type of cooking, they are pretty common and regular ingredients in your kitchen. If you don't use these ingredients regularly, that's okay. If you invest in them, you will use them up, particularly if you keep watching this channel. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and wash my hands, pull my sleeves up, and walk you through the ingredients, the equipment, and the mise en place. Let's get started. Okay, well, we're back, ready to get started on our perfect meatloaf. So the first thing I want to do is run through our equipment. Okay, what you can make adjustments according to what you have in your kitchen, but I just wanted to go through the things that you're going to need in order to prepare this dish. The first thing you're going to need is mixing bowls. Okay, I have two here, a small one and a large. The large is for your meat mixture. The small one is for your spices mixture. Okay, so this is what you need, small and a large. You also need your basic measuring tools, dry measuring cups, at least a 1 cup liquid measuring cup, and then some measuring spoons. Okay, you will need a cutting board, okay, whatever size you prefer, and a knife or a chopper of some sort to chop your onion. And then you will need a skillet, because the only thing we're doing on the stovetop is sauteing our onions and our garlic together. And then the fork, okay? Now the most important utensil that you're gonna need for this recipe is going to be your clean hands, okay? One thing about meatloaf, you do not wanna overmix it. Okay, and the best way to get those ingredients incorporated in your meat mixture without overmixing is your hands. Okay, I'm going to start off with a fork and then finish and put it on the baking sheet with my hands. Okay, behind me you will see I have a basic baking sheet. Okay, but I have placed on it a cooling rack. Okay, I'm going to cover this cooling rack with foil, and that will just help us with cleanup as we get later on into the recipe when it's done. Okay. So that's it for equipment. Let's turn our attention to our ingredients and our mise en place. All right, you all, I'm back and we're ready to talk ingredients. Okay. As you can see, we've got quite a bit up here. Again, don't let that discourage you. Okay. So let's start with our meat, the most important part of this whole recipe. I have 1 pound of ground beef or ground chuck. Okay. 80-20 is the best for ground beef. Okay, 80% meat, 20% fat. Without that 20% fat, you're not going to have as much flavor. Okay, so 80-20 is best. I've done it with 90-10. I've done it with 73%. It's both of those are fine, but you may find you have a lot of fat if you use a 73%. So that's why I go with 80-20. Okay. To that, I'm going to add a pound of ground pork. Now, the ground pork is important because that also gives you a little bit more fat, but as well as flavor. These two combined gives you great moist texture, okay? I have also done this recipe with 1/2 pound ground pork and 1/2 pound ground veal. But right now, veal's not in the cards, okay? So that's why we go with 1 pound of each. I also have some thick sliced bacon here that I'm gonna lay over the top of our meatloaf as it's baking. Again, more flavor layered on, okay? We need 2 teaspoons of veggie oil. We need 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. I've been practicing saying that all day. Hopefully it was enunciated enough. We also need 1/2 cup of buttermilk, okay? I use buttermilk. You can also use regular milk. You could also use sour cream, and you could also use plain yogurt if you don't have any buttermilk, okay? We want a little bit of tartness, but this is our moisture also in our recipe. We want about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper sauce, okay? Sriracha is what I was able to put my hands on the quickest, so that's what I'm going with, okay? We need 2/3 cup of quick oats. Now, you could also use ground up saltine crackers, okay? You could use breadcrumbs, but I recommend the quick oats because they literally melt into the meat, okay? They combined with our 2 eggs are our binder, okay? And I just feel like that works a lot better, and it literally disappears into the meat, okay? We need a teaspoon of salt. We need a teaspoon of dried thyme. We need 1/2 to a teaspoon of black pepper. That's just to your preference. And then these last 2 items are things that I add that I get from my local spice market, okay? This is a meatloaf seasoning, and this is roasted garlic bell pepper seasoning, okay? These are optional, okay? You could also use something like Spike, okay? Whatever you like, but these are optional. This is simply a combination of garlic powder, onion powder, minced dried onion, as well as dried red bell pepper, okay? So you can make up your own concoction. And then this is roasted garlic bell pepper seasoning. It's just a seasoning that you can get at usually local spice markets, okay? I just add those because I like the additional flavor. The last 3 ingredients we have here are for our glaze. A lot of people do use a brown gravy glaze on their meatloaf. We like the more tomato-based glaze, and I use ketchup as my base. This is 1/2 cup of ketchup. We also need 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. If you don't have ACV, you can also substitute white vinegar, okay? Anytime a recipe gives me a choice between the two, most of the time I lean towards the apple cider vinegar. And then for the sweetness, we have 1/4 cup of brown sugar, okay? So, oh, and I forgot to mention, sorry, Dijon, okay? 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. 2 cloves of garlic and a medium onion. Now I think I got everything, okay? Let's get ready to cook. All right, you all, we're ready to start preparing our vegetables. We're going to saute them in order to get them nice and soft and be partially cooked before we put them in our meatloaf mixture, okay? On the stove behind me, I have my small saute pan with the 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil in it, and I've got it on a low fire, okay? So that'll give me a chance to get all this chopped up. I'm gonna work on our onion as well as our garlic, which is gonna go in after we've let the onion saute for a little bit. So let's start by cutting off the ends of our onion. And I just saved my little meat tray that my meat was in to put my scraps on. And then go ahead and peel this. You all, this is a sweet onion, okay? That is my preferred go-to onion. You could use yellow, you could use white, but I prefer a sweet, okay? Vidalias are a great onion that will be in season in the late spring through the summer, okay? That is my one I love to get. But right now, They have lots of sweet onions available in your grocery store. So whatever onion you prefer, feel free to use that. I'm gonna chop this one in half. And then I'm just going to rough chop it. Just use the tip of my knife to cut all the way through. I like mine to be a bit smaller of a dice, okay? Don't like big chunks, okay? But again, this is going to cook for an hour. So between sauteing it on the stovetop and cooking it in the oven, they should be well prepared. But I like to make them smaller rather than larger. Now I'm going to turn the fire up on my pan and then add my onion. Okay, I know that seems like a lot of onion, but trust me, you want it all. Okay, you got more than at least 2 pounds of meat that you're going to be using. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have all of it. Okay. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is mince my garlic. I have a garlic press here. I'm just going to use that and mince it. I don't know if you can hear it, but my onion is starting to sizzle. So I'm just going to mince my garlic. Two cloves, okay? Each one of these individual pieces is a clove. You can do it by hand on your cutting board if you like, but just make sure it's nice, small, tiny pieces. Okay, we don't want a strong garlic flavor. We want it to be subtle. So that's what we've got with our 2 minced garlic. If you like more garlic, feel free to add more. Okay, and I'm gonna sit this over by the stove and give this a stir while I'm here. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn my fire down so that that is ready to saute nicely without me having to monitor it as much. Here is my bowl of meat. I have both the pork and the ground beef in here. I have already added 1/3 cup of the oatmeal, okay, and now I'm going to add the second 1/3 cup. Just sprinkle it on top, okay. To that, I'm going to add the meatloaf seasoning. That is optional, okay, and I just kind of pour some in my hand. I usually put about 2 tablespoons or so of it in there. Same thing with my roasted garlic bell pepper. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Not quite that much, okay, about that much. Maybe a teaspoon and a half, okay? So now those are in here, and I'm gonna sit this to the side because now it's time for us to work on our wet mixture. All right, you all, we're ready to put together our liquid mixture, okay, our wet mixture. So let's start with 2 eggs. I'm gonna go ahead and I always crack my eggs in a separate bowl just to make sure that they're good. And it's much easier to get a cracked shell out of a small bowl than it is your mixture that you're working on, okay? So I'm gonna put those over here. Put my shells in my garbage bowl. Add my 1/2 cup of buttermilk. And then I need my spices. So I have my teaspoon of thyme, my teaspoon of salt, and my 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Give or take, you all. This is definitely adjustable. I need 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. Dijon has a bit of champagne in it, white wine, okay, depends on the kind that you use. And then to that, I'm also going to have 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Hopefully that's the last time I have to say that today. And then finally, we need some hot sauce. I've got, again, sriracha here. I'm just going to put a nice healthy squeeze. Half a teaspoon is usually enough. I like a little bit more. Do not worry about it making your meatloaf spicy. It will not. This little amount will simply add some flavor, not necessarily any heat. Okay, I've got a little small whisk here. And I'm going to whisk all of this together. It is not a pleasant looking concoction. Okay, but it tastes fabulous once you add it to your meat. Okay, so I think that's all we need with this. I'm going to go ahead and set this to the side, grab all of our components and bring them over, and then we will assemble our meatloaf. So we are ready to start assembling the last components of our recipe. Okay, first of all, I've already preheated my oven to 350. Okay, it is ready to go. And I have everything else that is going to be incorporated into the dish. So let's get started. I have my meat, my optional seasonings. I have added a little bit of fresh parsley that I had left over in my refrigerator that I wanted to use up before it went bad. You can use up to 1/3 cup, okay, of fresh chopped parsley, okay, or you can use 1.5 tablespoons of dried. This just adds a little more layer of flavor as well as some color, okay. I have my sauteed onions, okay. I don't know if you can see that, but they have a tiny bit of color on them. That's what you want, okay. I have let them cool a little bit. I added my garlic about 2 minutes before they were going to be done, okay. You do not want to burn your garlic, so make sure you add it once your onions are almost completely translucent and to the texture that you like. I like mine pretty soft, okay. So we're going to add my cooled onions to my meat mixture. And then we are going to add my wet mixture. Give it a quick whisk and pour it on top. And make sure you get everything out. My oats are already in, so now I'm ready to mix. So I'm going to start by using a fork, just a regular old eating fork. Get down to the bottom to make sure you get both types of meat and start mixing. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up my sleeves in preparation to finish because, again, I told you at the beginning, your best utensils in this type of recipe are your hands, okay? Because you want to make sure you get all the flavor throughout the meat. Turn your bowl. And I usually just mix with a fork until I no longer see dry oats. Okay, and you notice I'm not being rough with it. You all just kind of moving it around to make sure it gets incorporated. Now, there are 2 ways you can bake this. Okay, I'm going to do it free form on my baking sheet that I prepared with foil. Okay, I just took a cooling rack that I don't really use for baking, covered it with foil, and that's just going to help with cleanup. Okay, you can also prepare this in a loaf pan, like a bread loaf pan. Okay, I would recommend if you do the bread loaf pan that the recipe that I show you for the glaze, you cut it in half. Okay, because you won't need as much glaze because it's not free form. Okay, so now I'm going to pull my pan a little closer. Okay, you'll see I have my foil covered cooling rack on there. Okay, it is a metal cooling rack. Okay, and then I'm going to finish mixing with my hand. See how I can turn that over and see what still needs to be incorporated, okay? But I'm just kind of turning it on top of itself, turning my bowl, kind of using the meat to scrape down the sides and get everything out, okay? So now I want to make sure that egg is completely combined, okay? And you see I have lots of seasoning in here. So I kind of pull everything together and then just pick up the whole bowl and dump it out on my pan, okay? Now I can shape it the way that I want, okay? I tend to make sure the middle is a little more flat because it's gonna take more time for that middle to cook. But I want it to be about the same thickness all over, okay? Next thing I'm gonna do is take my bacon. I have 4 strips of thick sliced bacon, and I'm just gonna lay those over the top. First I go crisscross, then I go the other direction. And I kind of tuck it in on the one that goes on the short sides, okay? And then for the final step, you wanna make your glaze. Okay, so I already have my glaze ingredients measured out. And I'm gonna put them together in this bowl. I have my 1/2 cup of ketchup. You can also use chili sauce instead, but I find chili sauce isn't as tangy, okay? 1/4 cup of brown sugar, if it'll just come out. Probably because I let it sit. It's stiffened up on me. There we go. And then finally, we're going to add a tablespoon and a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. Again, you can use white vinegar, but use what you like. Tablespoon and a teaspoon. And I'm going to grab another baby whisk and whisk all of that together. This is a nice tangy sauce. You can dump all of it on at one time, or I like to put half of it on the first 30 minutes and then come back and add the other half the last 30 minutes. Okay. So now I'm just going to take my sauce and I kind of pour it right down the middle. I have already preheated my oven to 350. It is ready to go. And then spread it out. Okay, I just let it run a little bit down the sides, but I want to keep the majority of it on top. You all, this is one of the recipes that my husband requests often, okay? My kids cheer when they hear this is what we're having. And again, this is one of my go-to recipes. If I want to make something a little nicer, okay? When company comes, this is the recipe I pull out, okay? It never fails. It's moist. And it's always a crowd pleaser. I've catered with this recipe. And it's always a winner, okay? So now I'm gonna place this in my 350-degree oven for 1 hour, okay? I usually go a little bit past that hour just to make sure the middle is done, okay? Let me go ahead and put that in and set the timer. right, you all, there we have it. We have our meatloaf, our perfect meatloaf. It is ready to go. We're going to serve this with some mashed potatoes and some sweet and sour green beans and some dinner rolls. Those sweet and sour green bean recipes coming up on the channel soon. But as you can see, it's still bubbling from coming out of the oven. And you probably can't see it on camera, but the juices are running out of it. You definitely want to let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes after you take it out of the oven so that those juices absorb back into the meat, okay? And as long as they're running clear, you know that your meat is done, okay? So that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to Corey Creates. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Corey Creates 08 on both of those platforms. And I hope you'll join me again for my next recipe. Be blessed, you all. Have a good one.